welcome. This is the next webinar. This is actually webinar 4 in our series of social enterprise support. And what we're talking about today is leadership, adversity and sustainability. And we are absolutely delighted and feel very privileged to welcome Sarah Crawley, our very own CEO of iSE. And it was really interesting when I was putting together the collateral and the invites, etc., for today's session, because we have a little expert speaker profile that you are all aware of. And there's a certain amount of space, there's 50 words that I work on. Sarah way exceeded 50 words with her background. And one of the things that I've known about Sarah, because we first met back in about 2011, I think it was. And so in all the times that I've worked with Sarah across the West Midlands social enterprise sector, she has always been very generous with her knowledge, her expertise and her time. But she also hides her light under a bushel, if I may say, Sarah. You very, very quietly get on and represent the sector at so many different levels that I think in actual fact that a lot of that is possibly unknown to many, many people. So I'm going to do a very quick read through Sarah and some of her kind of achievements and landmarks, really. So Sarah was actually responsible for gaining Digbeth Social Enterprise Place accreditation way back in 2013. And it was one of the first social enterprise places kind of recognised with Social Enterprise UK that run that particular programme. And it really, really helped put Digbeth on the map. We've got well over, I think, 70 social enterprises, and it's a real hub of social enterprise sort of knowledge and experience and collaboration. And that's a really key thing, I think, across the social enterprise sector. Perhaps Martin, you're sort of originally based up in Digbeth and in the custard factory. So we've been working with you in terms of iSE and citizen coaching for much of that time. And I know you were also quite instrumental in really sort of getting involved with Digbeth. 2017 actually saw Sarah really sort of lead a stakeholder group in then gaining social enterprise city, social enterprise place accreditation for Birmingham. So it's one of the very, very few places in the UK that's actually kind of hit that double, and for Sarah to be an instrumental leader and driver in making that happen. We run many, many, many events for social enterprise sector, and not least our annual City Drive, which has gained real traction nationally. In actual fact, the national and even international speakers that we gain under Sarah's sort of auspice for those events is really quite staggering, and actually beats many, many organisations who have a much wider national reach. You know, so we're sort of a really small team at iSE, led by Sarah. She was also one of the very first WiSE women in central social enterprise back in 2017 when that started. I'm going to read off a little list here as well to make sure I get this correct. She's also in 2019 an honorary fellow of SE UK, and also is a visiting fellow of Aston University. And not only being a Social Enterprise World Forum returning speaker many, many times over, she sits on the government's VCSE advisory panel, and also works with the Task Force for West Midlands Combined Authority. That's your 30 minutes over. Thank you, Sarah. Goodbye. So we filled up a lot of space. So hello, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you very much. And I'm ready to go. And I'm sure everybody would like to move on from my background.
Well, it's an important to actually place that context, I think, because running iSE, so we're just celebrating the 20th anniversary of iSE in June. But you've also been CEO for 16 years. So that pedigree, that credibility of actually leading this conversation around leadership, adversity and sustainability, I think is really important background context. So today we've got a couple of topic headlines which Sarah's going to talk to us. So if I could ask you just, if you're not already on mute, just pop yourselves onto mute, that would be super helpful for us. So thank you for that. What we're going to be talking about today is basically sort of leadership in a changing environment, so very current at the moment, and something that is a really can be a really difficult thing, because we're not only got a very, very changeable marketplace, economic environment, but also we've suddenly had to adapt to leading our teams from working at home, working remotely, working digitally, different people having different needs in their background. So there are a number of facets around leadership when we are starting to look at that changing environment. And there's also adapting and changing the social business model. So how are we looking forward at our social businesses, our social enterprises, and really looking at that remodeling piece and ensuring that we are fit for purpose, reopening our doors and building for our future and building back better. That opportunity to actually innovate and change and rethink what we are all doing. So that's going to be a key one. And then 20 years of social enterprise doesn't go without a few ups and a few downs, and I think that sort of sustainability to actually really be the bedrock that social enterprise is here to stay. We're really gaining traction. We are really, really adding into the UK economy. And what does that look like for us maybe as we move forwards? So welcome, Sarah. Very, very delighted to kind of sit back now and listen.
Okay. It's lovely to see so many old friends, and I've missed you all, and it's a very weird world that we're living in, I think, at the moment, which everybody is saying. And I think that the challenge for us all in terms of leading our organisation is understanding what the new world's going to look like. And I feel like I've been there before. So I'm going to take you on quite a personal journey this morning, sharing with you. I've done a lot of reflecting around what I was going to say, and also mindful of time. To show that I think that iSE has been through, as Sally says, very many ups and downs, and I think I've learned a lot through that journey, and I want to share that with you. In order to help me with my journey, I've prepared some slides, so I'm going to pull those up and work through them, if that's okay. So, oh, I've got disabled screen sharing up. Is that possible, Sally, for you to put that up for me?
Ooh. Let me just see. Multiple.
Not to worry if you can't.
Try again. I've just done the multiple participants.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I've just lost it.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I was all ready to go, and then I got flummoxed.
Don't worry.
No, it's not letting me do it. Let me come out of there and go again. So, interesting. Here we are. Right, so hopefully you've got that there. So I spent some time with Sally talking about what I was going to talk about, and I think that always when iSE goes through massive amounts of change, I look to theory and want to really understand, how best I can support the organisation going forward. And I think that we've had 20 years, and in the very, very early days, you'll see from that slide, and I don't know if you can see it all, but you can see that we started in 2000, and I think for the first couple of years it was a fairly slow start. And then we had quite rapid growth around about the time that I took over as CEO. I was always in the background, so I'm a joint founder. My co-founder was a guy called Tony Davis, and he started the organisation, but I also did a lot of the bid writing and the strategic planning at the very, very early days when I worked in economic development. So we went through this rapid growth stage in 2004, and then we had, in 2008, the financial crash. That was the first time that we had kind of big adversity. And I think that what we had to do then was to make sure that we had enough money to pay the salary, that we could continue with our work. And we were in such a position financially with a lot of long-term plans that were bringing in income, that the financial crash didn't affect us as much as it would a mainstream business. The big change came for us in 2011 with the change in government, 2010, 2011, when the Conservatives came in and they decided to remove all of the funding for infrastructure support organisations. And so the money went. We had 5 contracts. At that time, local authority funded infrastructure support and government funded infrastructure support. We had a team of 13, and we had a turnover of about 800,000. And what I knew straight away, almost straight away, was with those contracts going, that iSE was either going to die, or we needed to find some other ways of making it survive. And during that process, we had to make some very, very difficult decisions. We were really lucky because, again, thinking ahead, in 2010, we purchased the building at Avoca Court. And so we had that building, which meant that we had an asset. And we had an asset that we could use to enable us to earn more money, because we could rent out space. Also meant that we could operate rent-free, and that we could also use it to continue to create social value. And I think the challenge for me at that time was to make sure that whatever we did wasn't just about paying salaries, but actually was about making sure that we didn't have mission drift, and that we didn't end up doing what we hadn't been set out to do. And at that time as well, we saw a lot of similar organisations to ourselves providing social enterprise, infrastructure support, startup support, growth support, special projects die. There were a lot of networks that were out there that were funded in different geographical areas, and unfortunately they didn't have the kind of bread and butter, or the underpinning approach that we've always had in iSE, and that is being financially sustainable. So we had to make some very difficult decisions. We lost staff, and our income dropped to about 220,000, so it dropped by 75%. And through very kind of careful approaches and the support of the team who bought into the kind of vision that I was developing, we were able to sustain ourselves. And it was at that time, not long after that, because I think that what you need to say when you're making those kind of decisions is that it's very painful, because you're watching a business that you've grown and developed and loved. You're unpacking it, you're taking it to pieces, and then you're rethinking what it's going to look like. So I went on the Goldman Sachs program, which for those of you that don't know, is the 10,000 Small Business Private Sector Business. And that gave me an external boost of energy and knowledge and expertise, which enabled me to rethink what the business would be like and how I could grow it, maintaining my, the values of the business and, what we've been set out to do. And since then, we've grown the business 20% year on year, and I've had a really sort of strong focus and kind of set myself matrix to help me grow the business in that way. So what a journey. And then now we're at COVID, where once again, I have been rethinking the business, and I should tell you a little bit about that later on, in the light of the environment, which is a different environment to the environment when we hit the problems that we hit in around 2011. So that's very briefly our journey. We now got a turnover of around about, I think it's about 430,000. So we're not a big business. We employ 8 people. I'm expecting that we'll increase the turnover by 100,000 this year, even though we've got COVID going on. And so we're still ambitious, and sort of maintaining that drive, I think, is absolutely key to surviving in this sector. So what do I use? How do I approach the managing of iSE, and especially when it's times of crisis? It's adaptive leadership, and I think, if I'm honest, I think I started to work in this way before I had a label for it. And it's very practical, and it's an approach that helps people to adapt and thrive in challenging environments. And it kind of draws on what Martin was saying earlier on, that actually you've got to be able to look at the business in its whole, both working with individuals and collectively and with the team, in order to bring about the change that you know is going to need to happen. You have to understand what environment you're working in. You have to understand what your assets are. You have to understand, you know, what the possible is, and you also have to understand the political context within how you're working. And I have 4 things, and many of you who know me well will know there's 4 things that I use as markers to help me understand what I'm doing. I want to understand what the political environment is, and that's a small p and a large P. So, you know, what is possible? What are people looking to buy? Where are the key themes that we need to be embracing in the sector that we're working in? Where are the funders looking to spend their money? What are the approaches of funders? What are the thought leaders saying about our sector? So gathering all that information, I broadly call that political. I then look at what my clients, my social enterprises that I'm supporting, what do they want? What do they need? What are they telling me that they need? You know, at the moment, obviously, we're doing a lot of research to identify that people are looking at strategic change, they're looking at changing the use of buildings and so on and so forth. I gather all that information with the team, and we work together to really understand kind of what people are going to want, because actually if we lose sight of what people want, then we haven't got a business. I then look at the finances. How is it going to work? What are my numbers? What's it looking like in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, 12 months' time, 2 years' time? How can I manage it? What are my overheads? Can I make any changes in those? And the projections and the understanding of the money is absolutely key to any change process. And then the last bit that I always look at is what I call technical. And so, are we fit for purpose? Are we in the right space? Have we got the right technology? Have we got the right people with the right skills? Do people need to grow new skills to develop? You know, all of those kind of things that actually are the nuts and bolts that underpin the business. And I learned this bit of theory years and years ago, and I use it as a check in my mind whenever I'm doing anything to make sure that it's going to work and that we've got everything in place. And I've always invested in the business as well as the people, because actually that's absolutely key. If I need new things, we need new things. Picking up from Martin's point, it's so important to be working from the balcony and also on the dance floor. So I'm sure you will have heard this expression, but take the time out to look down and see what's going on, collecting that information that I've told you about just previously, which actually is called the trampoline approach. The idea is you pull all those 4 things taut and get somewhere in the middle so that you understand where the business is. But you need to be able to get on top of it and look at what's going on the dance floor. You need to be on the balcony, but you also need to be down there as well, because often we're very small businesses and we can't afford just to look strategically all the time. We have to do some of the work as well. So I think that this is a slide, and I think Sally's going to send these out for you later on. It kind of builds on what I've said in terms of this kind of trampoline approach. You need to observe and interpret what's going on. And I can't say that more, particularly at these times, and trying to understand, you know, for example, in COVID, what is going to be the impact on our businesses? What's going to be the impact on our clients? How are we going to work with them? How are we going to support them to address all the issues that have occurred in this time? I think the other thing is that we also have to understand what the potential is, and that, you know, sometimes we can focus too much on the negatives and not on what's possible. And so, you know, I would stress more that there are always opportunities, and it's that cup, you know, we need to be making sure that we understand what we can do and how we can grow. And it isn't growing at the expense of others, but it's growing in order to maximize our social value. I think that we need to understand what changes we need to make. And this is where we're getting into the kind of slightly more difficult bit, because actually you need to be brave to make the changes. We have to make decisions about what's going to happen. We have to understand that we need to know that the clients that we're going to support would welcome those changes, because you know, we need to make sure that we meet their needs. We need to change from what was before to make sure that we're doing what we need to do going forward. We need to work with the key stakeholders, and it might be its funders, it might be politicians, it might be people in the community, and so on, to check out that the changes that we're proposing are going to meet the right needs. And we're going to have storming. So, you know, norming, forming, storming, norming, performing. We're going to have storming because people don't like change, and they're going to feel anxious about that. But we need to make sure that we as leaders can handle that. But we need to be prepared for it, because people will resist. And we need to be prepared to say, this is why we're doing this. This is what the impact's going to be. And this is the difference it will make to the clients we're working with, but also the long-term sustainability of the business. And we need to begin then to design those technical changes. So making sure, for example, that people have access to technology and the right kinds of systems, you know, in this new world. Or it might be that it's a completely re-layout of a building, or it might be changing buildings altogether and working in a different way, or it might be that you have completely new financial systems because you recognise during this time of overviewing that those other ones didn't work. Then you need to think about you, and you need to be robust. You need to be fit, well, and able to cope with all of this. You need to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and actually it's fine to have weaknesses. I learn all the time, but I also think it's a time for learning, particularly at the moment, to understand a lot more about yourself, to get into kind of some new habits, but also top up your knowledge, do the reading, find other people you can talk to who can help you. And really understand what your role is in the current environment. So is your role to, as a CEO, to support the others? I think so. Is it to make sure the team works? Is it to manage the finances? Is it to direct and enable and bring the team together so that they can inform the changes that are happening? And key to this is communication. That you communicate all the time what's happening, because that's the, you know, when there isn't communication, people end up really feeling unhappy, and you can't do, you know, no organization is any good without its team. And then the navigating bit, stay focused on what needs to happen, be courageous, because you will need to be courageous probably, be inspiring. I hope you know that I'm inspiring. Experiment. So actually don't be frightened of trying stuff that doesn't work. And actually I think if you kind of can put all these things together, it's an opportunity for your business to thrive. And I've lived this model. I've lived this model on 2 or 3 occasions, and it's been tough. But actually it's worked, and you know we will, even though we've got COVID and so on at the moment, we will continue to grow. Are you okay? for me to carry on, Sally?
Absolutely. I'm just fascinated and totally absorbed myself, and I'm sure everybody else is. So yes, please do.
So there's some hard stuff, I think, as a leader. And you know, often you don't get these in presentations, but actually I thought I would mention some of the tough stuff, because it isn't easy, and anyone who thinks that leading a business is easy is mistaken. I think when you're trying to support organizations to go through change, the feelings amongst the team, but also maybe amongst others, because people are fighting resources, is that you can get quite marginalized. And you know, I think the thing is to stay clear, to be very clear and communicate what you're doing, and make sure that you're forming the relevant relationships that you need to form. Lots of people are struggling at the moment, but relationship is still going to be absolutely key. Well, it's what I use in terms of getting you through. I think it's very easy to be diverted, because it might be there's an opportunity over here, or there's a funding over there, or there's an issue that belongs to someone else in the organization that you can get diverted to. Actually, you need to be really clear about what your role is, what you're doing, and how you're going to cope with it. And just be mindful, some diversions are okay, but some can take you right off that focus, which is sustaining your business. And actually, you need to be really clear about what's your role and what's someone else's role. But also, stakeholders can divert you, because they might want you to do something that you know isn't actually your core business. So you have to make a decision as to whether or not it really is what you're going to do, or whether it's what someone else should be doing, and just saying, actually, at this time, I haven't got the space, but I could pick it up in another time. Attack. It could be that people are very critical. That you get some, you know, controversial feedback, that people say, oh, such and such a body's doing this, such and such. But you know, you have to be thick-skinned. It could be internal, it could be external, it could be your board. Again, that real clarity around what you're doing is absolutely key, and that's why I said earlier on, you need to be strong. People are, you know, grieving, people are having a tough time. They're all trying to work out what the impact of what's going on is on their families, on their lives, on their positions, their relationships. And you need to just be mindful that actually it's probably doesn't mean anything. They can't help it. It's just a situation that they're in at the moment, and just kind of, you know, put it into context, I suppose, is the way. And actually, if we are leaders, I think we have to be a bit thick-skinned. Seduction. So it could go the other way, that people are saying, you know, really good things, or you could get seduced into going in a different direction, and not be focused. And I think it's about really being real, really being close to what you're going to do, and looking critically at all of the interactions that you're having, and making sure they fit this future plan that you've got. And then the last one is loss. And in 2011, I was bereft. I think one of the toughest things that you ever have to do as a CEO is to undo your business. And you know, I think you know, I'm not sure that you ever really get over that. So work out how you're going to handle that, and seek support from other people, I think, in terms of managing that, but understanding it in the context of having to reduce something to then in the future grow it. So I think, and I must talk about the team, and I have an absolutely brilliant team at iSE. And I think one of the challenges is supporting, through any change process, is supporting people to understand what their role is, and how how we can work together as a team in order to make it happen. And there's one bit that's about compliance, and people doing everything that they've been asked to do with systems and processing, but not actually being fully committed. And actually, in these times of change, what you need is complete commitment. Everyone needs to have the same goal as to where you're going to. People have to understand what their purpose is, what their roles and functions are, and where they fit in the whole in terms of growing the organisation into the next stage. And what you need is 100% commitment. You need to know that the people behind you are doing what you've asked them to do, they're doing the delivery, they're putting energy into it, and that everyone is, and that people aren't to level. You don't need neediness, you need people to kind of get on and do what it is that you need them to do. And I'm really lucky because throughout this journey of 20 years, we've had the most amazing team. And we absolutely share goals. We review the goals, we review our sense of purpose, we look at everything that we do to understand where that fits in terms of the journey of iSE. And I'm sure all your organisation is the same, but I couldn't do a presentation like this and say that it's just about leadership, because actually it's about the team as well, and the team understanding, you know, where we're going. So I did some work for my, this is something that this is a slide that went to my board. So I talked to you about the journey of iSE, the theoretical kind of approach, and some of the things that I think are key pointers in terms of managing change, or have been for me. You know, there's lots of people who do university degrees on managing change, and MBAs and PhDs, and we're doing a sort of 20-minute presentation. But these are the things that I think that you need to be aware of over the next few months, that are the pointers. When I said to you before about understanding that political environment, these are the pointers that I've fed into my board. So I think that, what do we know in terms of COVID? We know that technology will be at the heart of any successful organisation going forward. We know that big offices will downsize, buildings will have different functions, and workers will need smaller spaces for smaller meetings. So there's going to be massive rethinking of property and the use of space. Staff will need new ways of working with clients and customers, and we need to think about working smarter and using the technology that we previously mentioned. We're going to need different skill sets going forward. Coaching online by phone, distance learning, use of technology, and so on. I think we're also going to need to create access to technology in the communities that don't have technology, and I think that's another kind of big one that isn't on this list. We're going to have to use government guidelines if we are going to work face to face, and we're going to I think lockdowns will be the thing of the future. I don't think this is the last that we've seen of lockdowns, in my opinion. I think that it could come again in different forms. So actually we need to be better prepared, I think, for a future that looks quite different. We know there's going to be a deep recession. We know that when the grant money finishes, there's not going to be a lot of money left, because that will have all been given out and people have got to repay that money. So we need to be thinking about, what are we going to do once this money's run out? How are we going to be sustainable in the future? And actually, it is the time to be brave in terms of income generation. Do we need to be working in markets where we know there's going to be needs? Do we need to be not losing what your social value is, but actually really having a much better understanding of what your market is? For Judy, for example, we know that the whole of the recycling agenda and furniture and so on is going to continue to grow and grow. So, you know, in this environment, it's going to be a way that you can continue to earn money. Our buildings income, so that's our buildings income is uncertain. I think there's no way of predicting what's going to happen with existing tenants. We know there's going to be a likelihood of increased unemployment, maybe for up to 2 years, maybe for longer. So actually there's going to be needs around all of that. And, you know, you will have noticed I haven't departed yet, and I was supposed to depart this month, but I've put my departure back for 12 months. So actually for iSE, in terms of the changes that are coming along, that's something that they need to bear in mind. So interesting times, and what I'm trying to do currently now is to, in the context of all of that knowledge, is build a a future for iSE that builds on some of those key blocks there, the technology, the changing use of building, the fact that there is going to be increased unemployment, and that we know that in terms of the corporate sector, there aren't going to be face-to-face meetings for the next 6 to 9 months. So it's a lot about changing in the ways that we're working and what we're going to do. But at the same time, making sure that we don't have mission drift. So my final thoughts are communicate, communicate, communicate. Ensure that everyone supports the shared vision. Make sure you've got the technical tools. I'm buying different technical software and so on to help us, enable us to do what we're doing going forward. You know, we're looking at some different ways that will underpin the work that we need to be able to do. Don't put off making those difficult decisions, whether that's about building or people or anything like that. Encourage professional development, and that includes you. And encourage people to think about themselves also, what they think they're going to need. So that's self-reflection and so on. Work the assets. Again, anyone who knows me will know I always say that. The physical assets, the people assets. What can you do? Cash is king. Know your numbers, and that will help you going forward. Cash really is king at the moment. You need to make sure what you've got in the bank, not what you're expecting and so on. And my final thought is be ambitious. I think you can. I think it's all really possible. I'm quite excited about the changes. I have to say also, I love change. I love to be able to use my brain in this environment, and but I also like to work in a team. So working in isolation doesn't really suit me. Anyway, there's some very personal reflections there. I hope it's been interesting. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. That's amazing. We really appreciate that. That was, as I say, utterly absorbing, and really appreciate that it is a very personal journey. You've always absolutely led iSE and the sector from the front, and it is, I think, your passion and your enthusiasm that is very much appreciated by so many of the social enterprises that iSE has helped start. If anybody would like to unmute themselves, you're very welcome, and we'll kind of move into a little bit of an open Q&A, if that's okay. So feel free, audio on.
I've got to go now, but
okay.
Lovely to meet you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You.
I really appreciate it. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
So in terms of questions, if I can kind of go to Carol first. Carol, you popped up in the chat a really interesting question, which was kind of about how do we unite in these sort of difficult times and across the sector. Would you like to kind of reiterate your question, and perhaps Sarah, you could reflect on it?
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. I found it really enlightening. I attended a webinar from a university yesterday on leadership and management. You nailed it, they didn't. So it just shows that what we've got in this sector is absolutely brilliant. And I will come back to you on a couple of other things. But my question was around, how do we unite the movement to partner and work together to bring those who have done the work to survive and grow? So that's what it's about. How do we unite the movement? It's something that I've seen has been quite difficult. We've worked in silos for such a long time, and now we want to sort of get it across there. Let's partner together. Let's grow together if you've done the work.
I think, as you've said, it's quite difficult because often social enterprises are working in communities and in localities and, you know, cities. They haven't got the time or the energy to do something that's global. But I think we need to work our infrastructure, our national infrastructure, membership organisations far more, and get them to represent us in a far more effective way. I do think they did a good job in terms of lobbying government to enable social enterprises to bid for money, because government were just going to go down the charities route and not the social enterprise route. And work together, those infrastructure organisations, to get that letter, to Baroness Baron, and so I think it's a challenge. I think the places approach is the way really to do it, where you can share out the work with one another, and I think also the combined authority, which you know about. So sorry, no magic answers there.
But maybe keep talking, keep collaborating, and as you said, communication is the key, isn't it? And we need to communicate as a whole sector, not just in our silo teams. And I think through those conversations, often a culmination of people's insights and perspectives, suddenly you can identify real opportunity. And I really do agree with you, Sarah. It's, you know, change can be so difficult, and recognising that for individuals as well as organisations. But change does bring opportunity, and it also can drive innovation, which kind of comes through in a lot of diversification of goods and services kind of thing. We've seen that very much within COVID at the moment. Does anybody else? Martin, you've waved, so please do ask a question of Sarah.
I just think, you know, as an observation, have a look and see who is on the call today. Have a look on the screen, and what I think you see there are the people who haven't been scared to do different things, who have embraced change, brought everybody together. And I think you only got to look at some of those names, and I actually started building a list, and then I thought, well, it's virtually everybody who I know who's on the call, and you know, a key thing about that has been Digber's social enterprise, which for us has brought us much closer to those enterprises around us. I think that the City Drive is an amazing experience, and there's a virtual seminar going on in America over the next 2 days, which is definitely sort of worth a look at what events might look like in the future. And I just thought, Sarah, how can we make sure we don't lose that togetherness of City Drive and Digber's Social Enterprise Quarter and some of those things?
I think that's a good point. One of the things that I'm working on at the moment, which is shortly going to go live, and Carol knows about this, is that we're looking at a recovery group that comes out of social enterprise, Birmingham Social Enterprise City. And I think that will drive the next kind of period of work in terms of supporting organisations to manage through this difficultness that we're in at the moment. iSE still has continued to run virtual networks online, but it doesn't suit everybody. So I think we reflect on what's happened over the last 3 months and work out going forward how best to support organisations. And no, that's something that we need to take on board. I think also that in terms of City Drive, I have been thinking about that already and thinking, oh, another City Drive. You know, talk about loss. The 17 events for City Drive all being cancelled, and all the 6 months work that went into that was kind of quite devastating. But, you know, it was the right decision to make, obviously. I noticed that Social Enterprise World Forum is doing a 5-day conference this year online, but I don't know if that's enough. So what I want to do is have a real think about what's possible. And, you know, I always try things in an innovative way, but I think the point about City Drive is it has to be fresh. That we don't do the same program each year, that we you know, I challenge the team as well, and I'm looking at Miriam and Sally, right, we're going to have a look at what can we do with coffee this year, for example, which we did a couple of years ago. Or we want to do something with young people. How are we going to do, you know, that sort of thing. And I think, you know, but also we need more people to come forward and say, actually, what about this idea? What about that idea? Because it's quite a heavy one, you know, I think for all of us. So a way of collecting more people in terms of our steering group, I think we'd love it. So and we're up for any ideas, and we'll enable wherever we can.
Oh, that's brilliant. Janet, you've just popped a little question or comment into the chat group about sort of online workshops and being able to retain that sort of interaction and sort of simulate that, really, even if it's within these sort of temporary few months kind of thing. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
It's been quite, I say it's been a bit difficult, because I made the decision at the start of the year, well, just before Christmas, that I'm leaving teaching, and that has been 4 years in the making, and I've wanted it from when I started Feed My Creative. So I've actually left a permanent position in teaching now, so I can do this full time. So the timing actually wasn't great. It's actually been really good in terms of what I'm doing next in actually registering as self-employed, so I have a organisation or business in my name, as well as having Feed My Creative, so I can actually earn the income without having to take it from Feed My Creative. As I was saying, I've been booked to do 2 online workshops, and the very first one was so difficult for me because I'm used to that interaction. I've never been the kind of teacher that stands at the front. I'm the person that walks around. I like to interact. I like to see what somebody's doing. I like to be able to see and give that positive, you're doing great, even though people think that they're not necessarily doing as great as they are. So being in front of a screen like this, and I can't necessarily see what they're doing. I've had the screen in front of me, I've got my phone right there, so you can actually see a two-way thing. It's not the same as the physical interaction that I know I've built on for such a long time, and it kind of frightens me when people say, just do some online workshops. And I know I can do like a YouTube channel, I can do classes that way, but for me it's not the same. And people have commented on how the family environment that I like to have, we play music, we get together, we talk. And for all those people that need that social interaction because they're stuck inside and they find it hard to mix with people that they don't know, when you're stuck behind a camera, it's almost like you lose that impact. And it kind of frightens me in how things are. When am I going to be able to start that? Because people are asking, when's your next workshop? When your next? I have no idea. And it's trying to plan ahead for something where I'm not 100% sure in how I'm going to work it.
Yeah. And there aren't any answers really. I don't know if we've obviously, Sally's been doing these for me. I have a problem too, because I work by relationships, and I work by through interactions, and I'm really hoping that this is quite temporary, and that we might be able to talk some external things, but it's just very difficult at the moment, I think. Anyone got any thoughts? Do we want, I was part of a round table yesterday that was horrific, that was organised by Morgan Sindel. And I was telling, because we have a team meeting every morning at 9:30, and I was on that earlier. And there were 6 of us that were supposed to be experts in the field of kind of social value. And the facilitator sat in the middle of all the squares and then went and asked us each a question in turn on the table. There was no kind of I've got this opinion, and so all the energy was, it might be something that's about how we do this, and maybe we try some stuff out. Martin, have a go.
So as you know, I like to look at things in different industries, and one of the things that a Michelin-starred restaurant in Leeds is doing is to bag up all the ingredients that you need, and then what you do is you come and collect them and pay for them at their doorstep in a socially distanced way, and then you tune in live on the equivalent of Zoom. They do use another platform, and you cook these Michelin-starred items from the ingredients you've picked up. So I'm wondering whether for Janet, what you could do is have all the ingredients of how you make a bag and all the information. People come and pick it up, and then they tune in, and you make the bag together live on Zoom as you go through.
Yeah, I have thought of that, and I don't want to look at the negatives before the positives, because I was working on packs to be able to send out with instructions anyway. The difficulty with that is how long would I do the class for? Because remember, everybody's at different levels, and if I have a live, it's almost like we can do that and they can watch it back afterwards. But if somebody's going at a completely different speed to others, Miriam would know from when I was at Women Enterprise Hub that you've got some that are experienced and they will race ahead, and then there's the others that aren't so experienced and they just want to take their time. So it's just working on the balance in terms of how that works. But it is a good idea, because I have thought about doing the packs anyway, because I think it's a good thing that people can work in their own pace at home as well.
Certainly, one of the things that Sarah and I have spoken about as we've been obviously moving things online is, with Sarah's educationalist background, is the appropriateness in terms of your audience. And some of the things that we've kind of looked at we've had to kind of almost categorise and sort of say, actually, that's a more appropriate online session for Fuse Startup, whereas actually this is something that could fit into the WiSE webinars where people are a little bit more ahead in terms of social enterprise, their understanding, their social enterprise journey, that kind of thing. So I don't know, that's been quite important to us, hasn't it, Sarah? As we always look at audience and be prepared to kind of create a bandwidth within the audience and make sure that we're doing something appropriate and relevant that can resonate with that particular group. Can
I just add one thing? Can I add one thing to that? But Janet, there's an opportunity there, because if you can reach different people who are slightly more experienced, who are slightly more confident. And so if you were to do your packs and sell your packs, we could definitely promote them. And you could reach a different audience that would want to purchase it, that could actually give you some income that you could use later on when you need to do work with people that are going to take less time, going to take more time. So actually it's an opportunity. And you could do a YouTube, and so people could have a link on your pack and they could look at the YouTube, because I've been doing YouTubes for bread and I'm very slow at making bread, but you know.
No, thank you. I mean, the one thing that I have to say as well is the one thing that I've loved about you and iSE, that you have supported me since the get-go, from when I had my CIC application that I was struggling with. The support that you've given me from then and from all of you, it's been absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, I'm forever grateful for that, because you're always
thank you.
what I'm doing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's a really lovely testament. Thank you very much for that, Janet. I know that would be appreciated very much by Sarah and the whole team, including past members of the team as well. I think has anybody else got any other sort of key questions that they'd really like to ask? Judy, you're waving, so we'll ask Judy if you'd ask your question, then we'll kind of wrap up and bring the session to a bit of a close, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sally. And I just wondered, what I found is it's quite a practical thing, and it's about the people around us and our teams. And what we found is, because we've been back at work in the background, and if I'm just parochial and talk about Upcycle, although as you know I do look after a number of other things, is because we've been back, and quite some of the volunteers have, we kind of feel a bit further down the journey. And what I wondered is how what I found is some volunteers very reluctant, quite scared, and the same with members of staff of our parent company. And so it's like some volunteers can't come back anyway because of personal circumstances. And I think there's a real need in the city to do a quick volunteer drive, a bit like the Good Sam thing, but for social enterprise. So I don't know whether we can kind of put something in place quite quickly, because a lot of our volunteers are quite elderly, and I know charity shops and others are struggling because so a lot of volunteers can't come back, and because they've been off, they're not minded to. But also members of the team, some of whom out of our parent company, still haven't properly come back because they're too scared. And yet those of us that have been back, kind of we feel as if we've got over that a bit and we've got things in place. So how have organisations dealt with the team being at different places along the journey in terms of recovery and moving on?
So one of the things that I've been doing over the last few weeks is I've rejoined my Goldman Sachs program in terms of my personal development, and it's only for those who are an alumni of it, and it's been really helpful. And one of the things I've had the benefit of has been expert input, and one of the expert inputs has been around people and HR and this very situation that you're describing. And what they've been saying is that there is clear government guidance on opening up buildings and how that works. And that if the organisation has to put in place the guidance that's there, and that staff, if you've put that in place, staff can't really refuse to go back to work. And that, so I think it's something about biting the bullet a bit and saying, if people are really concerned and they raise a proper issue, then that needs to be dealt with in the formal way. But I think it might need to be done a little bit more formally to say, what's the issue? How can we help you address it? And then actually there's no real reason why people shouldn't go back if everything's in place. Sounds a bit harsh, but interesting.
I had a pack from the Retail Charities Association or something, or Institute of, and it was absolutely brilliant because it was do this and then do that and then do that. And where I've been able to sit in front of volunteers and go through it were great. But actually the parent company doesn't seem to have adopted that same strategic, well, that wouldn't surprise you, Sarah, that same kind of strategic approach to saying these are the guidelines and this is what we do. Simples, as someone said. But
it's the rules. It's the rules. Follow the rules.
Okay. Can I thank everybody for joining us today? I think we could have gone on for quite a lot longer and certainly shared so much more of Sarah's insights. So thank you very, very much, Sarah, for such a brilliant day. Can we all kind of like do the, if we were there, we would all clap, and maybe Mariam, you can kind of like do a quick capture for us, having a bit of a clap. Martin's disappeared, we've scared him off somehow.
No, he's gone for coffee.
So thank you so much. I mean, absolutely fascinating insight, and there are some really interesting links there, I think, potentially into what will be our next session. So information will come. Oh, Martin's back.
Oh, he's got a parcel.
What's he got?
Oh, he's had a delivery.
So we were just saying, Martin. Oh, nice, excellent. So our next session is going to be on June the 24th. It is going to be a 2 p.m. session, and we are equally delighted. We've absolutely fantastic range of speakers throughout the webinar. But this is going to be Matt Smith, who's the CEO of the Key Fund. So we're putting together something which is obviously going to be finance funding based. I think it's been really interesting where we've kind of, as social enterprises, almost had to kind of go back to the grant income model for the time being, but obviously what we also need to do is get back to our trading objectives as social enterprises and looking at that sort of remodeling of finance and much of that, as Sarah's kind of referred to. So thank you all so much. Brilliant session this morning, really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Lovely to see you.
Yes, lovely to see everybody. So take good care. There will be a follow-up email to everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Catch up with you all soon. And email me if I can do anything. Bye.
Bye.